Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Horsehead Central School District Board of Education meeting. Today is February 16th. We're at the MNC in Horsehead High School, and tonight's Board of Education meeting will be led by President Ms. Christine Depp.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Could you please join me in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first up on our agenda tonight are the approval of our minutes from our January 19th meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Second. Any comments, questions, or discussion on the minutes? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the next part of our agenda is opening up for community questions and comments. So if anybody here would like to address the board, I'd ask you to come up to the podium, state your name and your address. You would have 3 minutes to speak. Addressing the board with any questions or comments that you have is really just you stating what you want to talk about, but it's not a two-way discussion. So we'll listen to whatever anybody has to say, and then if it's appropriate to answer, to get back to you at a later time, we will do that. So I would ask if anybody here would like to address the board, to come to the podium now. Okay. Moving on to our student representative report. So we have Mario here joining us tonight. So welcome, Mario, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mario Ruggiero, and I am filling in for Tatiana Kopp tonight as student representative. Here are some things going on in the district. For sports, boys and girls varsity wrestling became Section 4 champions last weekend, sending 7 athletes to states. Ryan Massio celebrated his 100th career victory as well last weekend. Girls basketball recently beat Stack West Championships and beat Shingle Valley on Tuesday in a triple overtime game to advance to Stack Finals, which is tomorrow night at home. Prior to the game earlier in the month, the team held a ceremony honoring some teachers that stood out to them. Last weekend, they celebrated their one and only senior, Molly Wolf, and the school mascot, me.
Supposed to be a secret.
Boys basketball unfortunately lost to Ithaca to take place in a three-way tie for Stack West. They celebrated their seniors in January, and their postseason endeavors will continue at the end of the month. Unified Bowling kicked off their mass season last week, and they will bowl a replay of their sectional title on March 2nd. Their senior night was about an hour ago. Indoor winter track had an eventful weekend, celebrating their many seniors and sending a handful of athletes to sectionals, a few of them placing at their events. Boys swim celebrated their seniors in the beginning of the month and have recently won Stack and had sectionals yesterday and will continue with sectionals on Saturday. Senior swimmer Cullen Cole is having an incredible season as he continues to break many pool records. Varsity bowling has a standout sophomore this year, Mike Reynolds, who recently came in first place at the youth bowling tournament. They celebrated both their senior girls and boys at the end of January. The team is gearing up for a strong postseason as well. Varsity cheerleading placed at Stack early in the month and is busy practicing for sectionals coming up this weekend. They celebrated their seniors with the boys basketball players early in the month. Now for some high school club updates. The senior class has announced a volleyball tournament taking place in May, which will benefit the clubhouse in Elmira. They have also been making Valentine's Day cards for veterans. The junior class began working hard on their prom, which will be in April. The theme is A Night in Clouds. The sophomore class ended their Gertrude Hawk fundraisers this week, earning some money to help their class out in the next coming years with proms and stuff like that. The freshman class just launched their cheesecake fundraiser. If you're interested in buying cheesecakes, be sure to ask a freshman. Kate Carpenter and Ashley Crozier led student council to bring back our semi-formal winter dance after 3 years of cancellation due to COVID. The dance had over 300 attendees and was a success for the club and the school. Varsity H is working hard on the dodgeball tournament, which will be held on March 10th. Be sure to keep your eyes out for more information. The Youth Activation Committee, or Unified, is busy with Special Olympics Winter Roof Challenge, which started last week. Horsehead is currently in the lead by 1,000 minutes. Also with Special Olympics, the polar plunge in Ithaca will be taking place soon. Mr. Tay, Mr. McCallis, Mrs. Earl, Dr. Tungus have agreed to take the dive with 2 students who have signed up to take the plunge for a great cause. Also coming up is a Winter Special Olympics in Syracuse. Horseheads will be sending Chris Jernigan, Anthony Miller, and myself to the opening ceremony to volunteer and represent Horseheads. And the Unified Esports team came in 2nd place nationally and were honored last Tuesday. The Language Club is gearing up to celebrate Foreign Language Week, which takes place next week. The Multicultural Club has recently celebrated South Korea, the Mexican holiday Dia de los Reyes, and St. Thomas. Yearbook Club has been working on yearbook ads, meeting their deadlines, and senior superlatives. The music and drama department have been keeping busy as usual. Earlier this month, a few high school singing groups have taken the journey down to Long Island for the annual Sing Strong a cappella competition. One of our groups competing won the Judge's Choice Award. Mr. Chabot and choir has been working hard in concert to honor former teacher, Mr. Griffith, who has pancreatic cancer. The concert will be held on March 28th. The Greenwood Players musical, The Little Mermaid, will premiere March 16th. Band will be sending 2 students to the New York State Band Directors Association Symposium on March 5th in Liverpool. A new flute trumpet and Nina clavier on clarinet. Winterguard placed 3rd in Vestal last weekend. Mrs. Brightside and Mrs. Dufort have been working on Unity Week at Horseheads High School. They have reached out to listed clubs with the opportunity to host an after-school event with the theme of humankind. The clubs will all be given t-shirts, and the t-shirts will be available to be purchased for the students to wear on March 1st, which is International Equality Day. Gardner Road Elementary honored our community's first responders by making Valentine's Day cards for them. Ridge Road held their annual talent show at the end of January, and the Intermediate School Student Council has been hard at work recently. They have hosted a plethora of fundraisers, including sock drives, collecting donations for veterans, pajama drives, and currently they are launching Innovators Attic, which is a benefit within the school to collect hygiene products. Meanwhile, the middle school has been putting together a musical on the new stage with Shrek Jr., which premiered last weekend, February 4th. Finally, a few individual standouts. Underclassman McKaylee Stedge has been inducted into the Elmira Youth Corps last month. 2 intermediate school students, Aubrey Hauk, won the Elks Hoop Shoot in the 10 and 11 division. She will be competing in the state championship on March 4th in Vestal. Sam Bunnell placed 2nd in the 11-12 age group, losing by a single point. The Science Olympiad team placed 2nd at the regional competition earlier this month. This season, the team won 4 bronze medals, 18 silver, and an incredible 12 medals. They'll compete at state competition in April in Syracuse. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Mario. That was a lot of content, so thank you very much for sharing. I really liked how you incorporated highlights from the lower grades as well, so thank you for adding that in too. All right, next up on our agenda, we have our superintendent report, Dr. Douglas, with the state of our school.
Yes, I'll go over to the podium. The board wants to adjust for the overhead to be turned on. Thank you.
Dr. Douglas, the clicker is right on the shelf.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of our community who are watching online, those that are here. Board of Education, this is always the start of a very long and drawn-out process as we deliver the state of our schools, but also kick off our budget development. It doesn't matter. Oh, well, behind off button. Ladies and gentlemen, the state of our schools. We've sort of gone through a lot with COVID. We've been out of COVID through major shutdowns and lockdowns for roughly about 2 years, but this is the first year that our staff, our students, our community really have returned to as much of a sense of normalcy as possible. You can see it from our students, our cheerleaders, our veteran events, activities and sporting events that are up there, as well as many other things, dances, plays, wrestling, students in the cafeteria for an assembly, students doing marches for the birthday marches. In addition, plays and other activities that are ongoing as well as competitions. We have returned to a sense of normalcy that was pre-pandemic. We still have to be mindful. The good part is, from what we're being told, is come May 11th, officially the federal emergency will be over. But in New York State, really, we have entered an endemic stage that we are seeing more illness in the lines of flu, RSV, strep, than we are necessarily seeing COVID-19. That's just a big thing that we have to be aware of, but we are moving forward, and it's great to be in this situation for our community and kids. HCSD 2030 educational opportunities that are going on. This was an initiative by this board as we've gone out and the community has overwhelmingly supported it, not through one but two formal propositions in supermajorities of 82% and 78%. As we go through, we've created educational opportunities now as board and community engagement, which we just had a safety presentation the other night, which you see in one of the pictures here, which opened and elicited a lot of discussions for a follow-up that is most likely going to come in the fall. In addition, we are starting with diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. This has had a little difficulty getting off the ground because we're starting in January and February, and Mother Nature seems to target the date that those meetings are on with snow days. So we are getting ready to reschedule that, and hopefully with the weather changing, we will be able to move forward as we try to look at how we can work for all of our students and work with our local agencies to bring about more of a discussion and community engagement in this area. As well as with our educational opportunities, we have really focused on wellness, especially coming out of the pandemic, and trying to work with our students as we return to a more sense of socialization and emotional learning activities within the school. We've focused on our curriculum advisory team and professional learning teams, especially during this time, as you can see, as we return to that sense of normalcy, but as we target the educational learning progress we are making coming out of that pandemic and the learning loss that was obviously apparent. I would not say it's learning loss, but it was learning gaps that were developed because no one was learning at the time, and we needed to fill the gaps and move students forward at a pace that's appropriately for them, as well as to get them back on grade level for all areas going forward, which we estimated to be about 2 to 3 years, and we are in the second of those 3-year process. In addition, I'm going to turn this over briefly to Mr. Gill to talk about some of our Portrait of the Graduate initiatives and the areas that we have been developing here together through our administrative staff. So, Mr. Gill.
Good evening. As Dr. Douglas was saying, the work of 2030 was twofold, the capital project and the educational opportunities that we've had as a district. Our multi-tiered system of supports is an overarching system to which we're approaching in our SEL work with the addition of school social workers and the social emotional learning standards and our tiers of intervention, both for behavioral, academic, and social emotional, and how that moves forward. So we embed those things as we go through the curriculum process as well. Trying to get some also learning with our administrative team on restorative practices and the work that goes there to better serve our students in that wellness framework that we talked about earlier that predates the pandemic and the work we've been doing all along. Obviously, our curriculum is always well-grounded in the New York State standards, and as they are released and we see new updates, we address them and build timelines to make sure our teachers are prepared to deliver that work and work through our curriculum editing teams and the work that comes out of Tiffany and Kelly's office to prepare that. ELA has been on its way for some time now, layering that work, our math, kindergarten algebra, and our general music in full swing. We also have much work going on in our science, grade K-5 and 6 and 9 just recently, looking at our STEM and FOSS kits and making sure those are good pre-K, also creating their own science kits appropriate for that level. Our world language department is kicking off the work, looking at a couple different things, including the seal of biliteracy and some other New York State initiatives. Physical education, Charles Tate presented at just the last board meeting on the detail of the work that's kicking off there. I'm excited about how we're bringing that lifelong learning to our students and being very specific about how we address that work. And special education is a lot of work that Kelly Squires and her team have been undergoing, from developing 15.1 curriculums in ELA that go and coincide with the ELA work there, and the role of 15.1 in the resource room, and making sure that they're comfortable with the resources and the curriculum being developed so that they in turn can support students in their time, whether it be in a lot of pushing levels. Underlying this all, you'll see at the top is this portrait of graduate idea. It is the unifying focus of our work. When we look at those in our attempts in the layering of curriculum to embed those key areas so that our students leave with appropriate skill sets and knowledge to be successful beyond our walls. Many of those things are beyond what we might see in our written curriculum from the state. They're developed and important to us to work in. We see that in some of our professional learning we're doing with the science of reading. We talked about that here. The work we're doing in phonics especially, the math models and our work that we're doing there. You might have seen your students working with manipulatives, 10 frames, arrays, number bonds, and the work, especially the elementary, to build that up vertically aligned to prepare students. And you look at some of our fourth grade work and you see the pre-algebra already coming out. It's amazing to see the work we're doing in math recently. Credit to that math curriculum team and the work we continue to do. The instruction delivery, we take some different approaches to meet the needs of students. At the high school, Chris Rolls worked with the staff and delivering different courses in different ways. When we did board tours last time, you might remember going into a co-taught class with English and seeing how we're supporting students in those environments, and also with the thanks of the some of the ads of teaching assistants, using those at the high school to really address some of our classrooms to where we have needs, and students have academic needs to get more adults in the room. So a very common practice at the elementary and continued practice all the way through in our high schools, and to continue that practice. We also see it adding new classes at the high school to assist students with any kind of, as Tom said, missed opportunities and experiences to make sure that they're going to be on level and successful. We had an opportunity to bring back Summer Learning Academy. This was an endeavor several years ago. It was grant funded, and now it's currently funded through our ARP and SORSA monies. It's where we take students that have been identified by our teams in our buildings at the elementary level to assist with closing, not having summer slide, and trying to keep students at grade level or at their reading levels or increase them. Very process that invited 200 students last summer. I think we might have hit 70 or 80 that took advantage of the program. We'll look to continue that program this coming year and look to to the operational budget in the future with the grant monies to see how can we sustain this effect or this work and really measure it as well compared to previous assessments and how those students are doing now. Because the object, the purpose of that academy is to keep students strong, and especially in reading and math at the lowest levels. Our assessments we often talk about our New York State assessments as we've done in these meetings, but we also are focusing when it comes to our performance tasks, which are those larger, or can be, but the performance tasks that the state has actually talked about that we're ahead of. As usual, we predicted that this is the way of the world and how we measure students and their work and how they demonstrate their work in a transdisciplinary format. Screeners and benchmarks has been an ongoing conversation, making sure that we don't over-test, that we are testing with appropriate things to figure out exactly what students, what their deficits are. So many conversations these last years on those particular the appropriate vendors and systems to work with to get the information we need to help students in very targeted ways. Computer-based testing, we are full out computer-based testing through 8 with math and ELA, and we will be looking to add the science CBT as well. Again, ahead of the curve, and it's going well, and we'll continue with that, and it's helping. We have some literacy being built, computer literacy being built early on with the help of our librarians and digital media specialists, and how that looks in the lower grades. Regents exams are continue to be altered as the assessments and the standards change. The New York State has gotten to a pattern where every June, early June, we see a new exam being administered and tested by the state. Last year it was supposed to be U.S. history. They did turn that to this year, so we'll see a U.S. history Regents exam changed up for this early June date, and then next year it'll be geometry. We'll have a change, And then moving forward, the state will have a series of exams that they're looking to test as they change the standards to the next generation standards and the assessment to match those standards. At this point, I'll turn it over to Tom about the Blue Ribbon Commission on Graduation.
As Mr. Gill said, first talking about the Regents exams, the state is in a transition period when it comes to Regents exams. And that's part of what the Blue Ribbon Commission on Graduation is about. What are going to be the future pathways to graduation? With that being said, they set a timeline for about the year 2025, 26. We've been informed just recently the Commissioner believes in this so much that they've moved the new Regents and the Blue Ribbon Commission on Graduation up to the freshman class entering not next year, but the year after that, or the freshman class of 2024 will be under new graduation requirements and possibly new Regents examination requirements or the lack thereof Regents. We just do not know. So this is an area all school districts need to pay attention to as we move forward and be very aware that we will have a sort of a state of transition between what they develop for all students in those pathways and the ultimate assessment and examination at the end of each year. So the board should be aware of that over the next several years. In addition to educational opportunities in the areas of technology, one of the things we talked about last budget year was moving to a one-on-one device for the students, and we have been beginning to phase that in. We started with 9th through 12th grade this year, where each of the students have the ability to have that device at home. If there is somebody that has connection issues of the like that maybe they're an errand or they do not have that connectivity, they can contact the technology department and we work with them on that. We are happy to report that through many digital surveys, we are one of the districts that have a very high connectivity issue, even now with the areas of Breezeport and Erin and some in Catlin as well, that the survey and work that one of our former teachers, Dan DeLorum, and the town boards that he's been working with has paid off in trying to develop that connectivity issue in the areas where we did not have some, especially during the pandemic shutdown time. One of the hard parts with one-on-one device planning is replacement cycle. We can buy 4,000 computers, but that means in about 5 years we've got to buy 4,000 more. So we've taken roughly a 3-year cycle to try to get it into a 3 to 6 year cycle, with the first 3 years being implementation. Currently, we're happy to announce that we are projecting for next year that will extend to all 5th through 8th grade students with the one-to-one, and we will be able to recycle the devices that we currently have down to the elementary levels, because that is targeted for the following year as we work through this process. In addition to the technology, as we're updating our classrooms and updating our schools that the community overwhelmingly supported, we are working on replacing the technology Prometheans in each of the areas so that we get current technology versus the 10 to 15 year lag that the district currently was on before I came. In addition, we are using Canvas Learning Management, and that will be more coming out on that in the next couple of weeks as we start to discuss and involve remote learning opportunities in light of either snow days, or as we've been told recently, there is a school district that has just shut down for the next 2 days because of illness, significant illness. Not COVID, it was more of the flu. So, and I think you'll hear that on tomorrow's news. In addition, the board, the district has really had educational opportunities in the extracurricular and athletic area as well. Our athletic department has worked very strongly over the past year with our superintendent's committee on the code of conduct and updating that, but also strengthening and implementing a new revised academic study hall that has been shown merit, as well as extending this to the middle school where it is not just the high school participating. We have seen that the numbers grow a little bit, but then also when they start working with the teachers, we have seen success and that the students have been able to participate. We were able to also implement finally our first home field band show to honor our musical talents and performances of our field band and marching band and ensemble. Also, out of that, we've implemented a winter guard season, which is in the fall, as well as a percussion drill team during the fall to help support as if it is the feeder program for our next year's field band ensemble. In addition, we are very proud of our unified sports, as Mario had talked about. We had senior night tonight, and they also made the announcement that unified basketball will be starting up in a couple of weeks for our spring season. So we are one of the only schools that have 3 seasons of soccer, bowling, and basketball at this point. And once we have those 3 seasons, we are going to try to start expanding down to the middle school. That way we have middle level as well as varsity level for our students to participate as an all-encompassing and a great way to honor our dignity and equity and diversity within the district. In addition, you've heard a lot about female sports, girls wrestling, girls flag football. These are 2 initiatives that we started flag football last year. This year, flag football will be recognized as a state level competition sport. That changes some dynamics because now the students cannot play more than 1 sport in the season. So we are going to have to do some adjusting with that, but I'm also very proud of the first year that we were one of the schools leading the way across New York State with our girls wrestling program, with our boys wrestling program. I'm happy to report that both of our wrestling teams have combined to win the sectional title for the first year for girls wrestling, and I think a continued back-to-back year for our boys wrestling team. So 3 years, okay, 3 people, okay. So what happens is we're seeing all kinds of accolades and accomplishments, but that comes because we are trying as a board to increase participation without diminishing our competitiveness at the upper levels. We really feel that we are putting in a situation where we may have some more teams, but more kids are getting the opportunity to participate, and we're exploring that in the intramurals in the years to come as well. So these are all some opportunities that I'm very proud to be able to present as the state of the school. And also, one of the biggest things that's been going on that everybody knows for the past 5 years is the Horseheads 2030 Phase 1 Building Our Future Now capital project, which is finally coming to an end within the next couple of months and then going through its final closeout. And also, our second project that was approved, Horseheads 2030, continuing to build. Both of these projects are in conjunction to the consolidation and merger study when I first came in to help bring about the reinvigorment of the district that was built in the 50s and 60s, but did not have necessarily major renovations going on regularly, where we regularly had our communities supporting other districts to rebuild, versus now those communities are also supporting us to rebuild with the investment of our school tax base and our residents that live here, that they will have something that raises the value of their properties as well. Through that Building Our Future Now, you can see some of the finished pictures of the new main entryway, the new entry. You can see in the lower left-hand corner the Family and Consumer Science room that is going to be opening soon, within the next week or so, as well as typical renovations of classrooms and our science rooms. That's one of the big initiatives, is that at the end of 3 full projects, the entire district will be renovated from elementary to high school. In addition, all class sizes will be brought up to date, where we did have class sizes of 300, 400 square feet. The recommended is between 700 and 900 square feet that provide better optimal learning. And I'm very proud of the community for overwhelmingly supporting that. In addition, Building Our Future Now also included some advantages at the middle school. Now they have sort of a cafetorium where they're starting to make use of that for presentations. Computer rooms renovations, technology suite renovations. They also had science room renovations and the art rooms renovated. This building is scheduled in the second project. However, right now it's on hold because we're not at that point of design. In addition, with continuing to build, what happens is we have the stadium complex that we would not get all the funding for at the very initial phase with Horseheads Building Your Future Now. With Building Your Future Now, if I can do, this middle part is what we actually built in the first project. Currently, what's actually being built are these 2 buildings, as well as this building. Those are the team rooms, and then this is the trainers, as well as officials room and music storage area, so that the field outside of the district stadium as well as the district stadium will have access for practice as well as major competitions. These are slated to be done at the end of this summer, and Mother Nature has been very good. That you can see, one building is already up because of the weather. Masons love warm weather in the middle of winter, so they're already on to the second one, and they're already transitioning to the third building. So if we can keep having the weather that we had, they are starting to build ahead of schedule. So we want to thank them for dedicating some time, especially during the winter. In addition, continuing to build, we know that we are, as this board has said, we are dedicating to make sure that the elementaries are built and built right. With that, we have 3 elementaries that we are adjusting. At this point, through construction managers, we can only build the exterior part of both Big Flats as well as Gardner Road. As you can see, the green is more the exterior portion, which will not impact the learning of the building during that time. And in the second year, the middle area, which is the cafeteria and the library transformations, will be stepped through so that during the second year, those buildings will still be operational. So that's for Big Flats what's scheduled, and that is getting ready to go out for bid in the next week or so. In addition, for Gardner Road, you can see that there's almost the same type of additions. These are classroom resizes. What happens is this building has already been outfitted for HVAC, and we are trying to turn our buildings into climate-controlled environments so that not only do we have winter climate control, but we have spring and summer climate control in our environments. So this is also done mostly out exterior in the first year and in the second year on the interior. And that has caused the issue of having enough staffing in the area to do 2 years of construction on roughly $40 to $50 million worth of construction projects. In addition, this project is already been bid. This we are getting ready to award this evening. This is the new revamped middle school parking lot. This allows for 3 lanes going in and out of the parking lot to allow our parents to move to the right, our staff to be in the middle and pull into the parking lot while the parents make their trip around and exit as the bus lot is on the backside and was completed during the first one. I'm happy to report we initially, with inflation, expected this to be about $2.5 million over budget. Our recent bids in a competitive bidding cycle brought it in at $200,000 under our original bid, and with contingency roughly about $400,000 to $500,000 over, which is almost a $2 million swing, which is good for our later projects in the overall. We will have to balance that out and hopefully get better bids, or we will have to look at what type of reductions or modifications we make in the out year projects, which is the intermediate middle school and the potential high school south wing. The big thing is we've had a lot of things going on, but we also have to look at what's on the horizon. And there's a lot of things that are on the horizon as a result of these district community votes and capital construction. One of the biggest things is redistricting and construction timeline. The redistricting and construction timeline sort of goes hand in hand, but what happens is it also limits what you can do and how you can build something. As we told you, Big Flats and Gardner Road are starting at this point because they will be done, I believe, before this, right around the summer of 2025. In order to redistrict, the district has to look at census and demographics research. We are in that process of doing an RFP, and we're hoping to have that completed somewhere around December 2023. Once we have that information, that helps us develop our bus routing for the 2025 switchover. And that would hopefully take place somewhere between January and June of 2024. And you can see the timeline. At which time, once we have our bus routes, that's where we start looking at how we are redrawing the boundary lines from 4 elementaries to 3 elementaries. The hopeful goal is to have those boundary lines drawn by December 2024. And the reason being is to give parents as much as possible the time to understand which school they will be assigned to, where there will not be major shifts, but there will be some shifts from all of our schools. Most of those shifts will be between Gardner Road and Ridge Road, as Big Flats really has its own entity that's farther out west. But they will have changes with who goes to Big Flats as their boundaries are going to expand. But once we have those boundaries, we'll put those out, and that causes a need for staffing realignment because we'll go from 4 schools down to 3. We do not look at this time or feel that there's going to be any staffing realignments that would be reductions, because we're actually going to have 3 schools with about 525 students in each of the schools, if you can balance it out. And that staffing realignment has to go by contract, and then we also want to take care and make sure as our students are readjusted that we have staff that they're familiar with in each of the buildings, and that should happen somewhere between February and June of 2025. And the high school, middle school, intermediate school construction would roughly begin the summer of 2025, depending on budget or budgetary needs. What happens then is September 2025 is a shift to 3 elementary schools. There's no way around it. The Big Flats would open with its new construction completed, as well as Garden Road. But Ridge Road, because of the nature of the building, the entire middle portion of the building, as well as the heating system, as well as fire system, must be brought down for construction. And in order to do that, we would have to try to do it within 1 year, which requires us to shutter Ridge Road for 1 year. There's pros and cons. The staff will not have to go through the construction. They will be placed into a climate-controlled building in Center Street. That's why we prepared it that way. And 1 year later, Ridge Road would reopen, and they would go back into a building that has its construction already finished. Now, once we go back to Ridge Road or Big Flats or Garden Road, everybody will be in the same building while future construction goes on, if that's approved by the community voters. Which, at this point, I'm hoping that it would be seen, because that would be the total renovation of the district, which they've supported regularly so far. Ridge Road will reopen September 2026. Center Street at that time will transition to district offices, facility center, because we'll have to prepare for that when we get to the 3rd project, as well as we've always had a commitment to our senior community members to bring and get them back their space that was originally here at the south part of the high school. And we also want to make it so that there's availability of the building for the community during the day as well. And that's scheduled for somewhere September 2026 to December 2026. Overall, another area on the horizon, which the community is not going to like, I already know that, I don't like it, but the state has mandated an automatic shift to electric busing. Zero emission busing must be in place and started purchasing, no matter what, by 2027. That means in the 2026 school year, we are only allowed at this point to purchase zero emission buses. We will not be allowed by state law to purchase anything other than that, which sort of has a rub. What if the community says nothing? I don't think our elected leaders are really listening right now, because everyone's very busy pointing the finger. Somebody else set these rules. But as you can see, schools must move to all zero emissions by 2035. That means we have to have almost 90 buses as electric buses by 2035. 90 buses at the cost of these buses, which you'll see on the next slide, is a heck of a lot of money. School districts are required to start planning now for the shift. Matter of fact, in this year's budget, the governor has put in that we must fill out a year-to-year report saying how we are getting there. So we're interested in seeing how that plays out. Potential impacts have not yet been fully vetted by our elected state leaders. We encourage everybody in the community watching tonight or hearing about it, please contact them and say, quit passing the buck, put the legislation in, or put a reasonable amount of, say, 25% of the school buses by 2035, 50% by 2040, or something that allows communities not to be hit with a major cost that we must fund first, and then the state supposedly is going to reimburse us. So I don't say that facetiously, I don't say that mockingly, that is the fact of the matter right now. Here's the hard part on this. The district we will be conducting a study in the near future on what our infrastructure to better understand the needs and implications of this mandate. Projected cost of one bus right now is $450,000 plus. To replace the battery that has a life of potentially 8 to 10 years no more, and these buses must stay in service for 12 years, is $220,000 a battery. In addition, you have to have the chargers for each bus. Right now, you have to be able to turn those buses around with a quick charge, which means the top line electric chargers are somewhere around $80,000 plus, and you need one for each bus. In addition, you have to pay for the power to generate the charging into the school district from NICE, which they have to be able to do for every school district in less than 2 years. I just don't know how they're going to do that, but we're being told that that is already taken care of. As you can see, right now, our initial estimates say on 100 buses, it's $45 million just for the buses, another $22 million just for the batteries, and then another $8 million for the charging. But right off the bat, then you have all the construction of the bus garage and all the changeover to the maintenance. This could be anywhere from $100 to $200 million bill for a school district our size. So we have to be very mindful. The state is expected to reimburse us, but again, we know how that goes, and we have to be very careful and know that if it's not guaranteed, how do we ask our community to do this? In addition, on the horizon, we are looking at enhancing our building safety by putting in a tracking system and sort of a welcoming system also, but runs by state issued ID, which is called the Raptor system. In other words, if there's something out there that says you shouldn't be around children, in the reporting system, when you come to the door, we would see that. We'd still assist you, but you would not be coming into our building. This also deals with individuals with custody agreements, with parental restraint agreements that we can load into the system to try to make sure our students while they're here are safe and that the people in the building are only the people that are supposed to be in the building. In addition to traverse a bus system integration, including tracking of routes and ensuring students check into the bus, this is the process of one of the reasons why we switched. That each of the buses will be starting to be outfitted with their own sort of digital media pad or iPad and so forth, where they can scan in the students so when they get on the bus, they know exactly who's on the bus. They also know when they get off and where that bus is, and parents will be able to sign on under their user information and be able to track the whereabouts of the bus because it would be subject to GPS tracking. This is a huge advance in safety and also helping to give people an understanding if the bus is late, where it is as well. One of the things that we have to talk about is shifting to remote learning for emergency closures when appropriate, or continuing to build, just so that you know, we are continuing to build snow days into the calendar. We are always going to use at least our limited snow days before we use remote closure, with some caveats that if we're doing it a couple days in a row, we may switch on the second day of remote learning to try to extend the ability not to get into our breaks that everybody relies on and really prepares for. In addition, we also have to be understanding that if all of a sudden something happens like what happened in Buffalo where there's a state of emergency, those days are considered gratis if the governor calls a state of emergency. So those aren't snow days for us, but they aren't educational days. Our big thing is if another pandemic or something happens, we have to be ready, and it's required by law. One of the things is that we are doing is we are actually going through the state's process of announcing it at a board meeting. We are going to be placing our remote learning plan up on the website within the next couple of days and then putting it out in an announcement so people can go and look at it. And then we will schedule an evening where they, or if they wish, to send in a question for us to consider as we review the finalization of that plan. And then we will submit it to the board and to the state as we're required to. Not everybody's doing that because they've already shifted to remote learning. In the meantime, if we had to, we will shift to what we're planning and we can make adjustments as we go. But we want everybody to know that this is something that is a good opportunity, even though it will be a challenging opportunity, especially once we get to one-on-one construction, one-on-one implementation. The big thing is it can also be used for if we have major sicknesses, as we're seeing from Canasteel Greenwood that went out for the next 2 days. On the horizon also is future construction needs. As we know, each time we did one project and we started the other, and then we have to start thinking about the next. Of course, since 2030, completing our build is something that has to be on the board's mind at this point. This would complete the 3-phase plan to update and renovate the entire district. Inflationary issues with the second phase may need to be addressed because right now construction parts, material costs are much higher than when we actually estimated it before the budget vote on this project. So we're trying to stay in line, but if we get out of line, we may have to use Horsehead's 2030 to bring it back in line as well as to finish our bill. So those are out there. Potential for the board to understand is a vote would be for the third project would probably be targeted around the fall of 2024, so it falls in line with the building lines and the aid reset to the spring of 2025, providing advice from our architect for timing with state aid. This project will complete the resizing of all classrooms to the state recommended level, implement climate control across the district, update academic spaces and technology, modernize exterior spaces for athletics, extracurricular, and community activities. So it's just something to start putting on the horizon. Ladies and gentlemen, on the financial avenue for the district, the comptroller issues a physical stress monitoring system each year. What you see up here is basically the indicators that they use, and you can see for the most part we're zeros across the board. Cash ratio, cash and investments as a percentage of the current liabilities. Notice we were at 0. We moved a little bit. This is because of capital construction. We have to be aware of it. And then cash as a percentage of monthly gross expenditures. We're growing a little bit. But as long as that number is not above 25, we are considered in what's known as no designation. In other words, the state does not consider us to have any physical stress at this point. We should always monitor this. If we get above 25, we will be labeled as susceptible to physical stress. Above 45, moderate physical stress. And above 65, substantial physical stress. This year, there are only 2 school districts in substantial physical stress. And one of them is very close by, it's Newfield. So that's where they try to help, the state tries to go in and also assist to get the schools out of that. So on behalf of our business office, superintendent, all the avenues and departments we look at, we try to look out for longevity. And I can't say that anything more that the state of the school's finances, the budget that you're just going to hear about, we are in very strong shape. But there are headwinds starting to come that we have to look at. Our big thing is we have to focus on elementary ed over the next 2 to 3 years, and you'll see that in our budget process as we try to transition and help and assist our students to 4 schools to 3 schools. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin our development on the 23-24 Horsehead Central School District budget. So before we get started, I hand it over to Katie. Time for questions, answers.
I have a comment. So great overview. I love seeing this every year. And it's just really impressive, I think, what the district has accomplished year over year. And it's just, this is a lot of work, right? A lot of great work that was done and a lot of great work that's upcoming. So, and it takes the work of the entire district, all the staff, all the administrators, everybody who works in the district and participates in the district to really make all that come together. So thank you for that. And it's pretty impressive.
Thank you, Ms. Dale. On behalf of myself, but most importantly, I just want to thank my entire team. I mean, I think what you said is very true. Nobody that's not in this world understands the complexities of the educational organization. Rules, policies, regulations, making sure we do what's right. And I have an outstanding team across all my departments, and that's as a courtesy of all of you allowing us to try to build on each year for our students and most importantly our community. And as the reason I say that is because of our work and your work together. In 8 years, we have lowered tax rates in this district by $2.26 per thousand. No other district is doing that. In addition, we've done $226 million in construction while lowering that tax rate. And I would challenge any superintendent, any board, to do better than what you have done. So I want to commend you, and as we go through another budget season, there will be hiccups along the way, but I have every confidence in our business office, Ms. Pizzetti, Mr. Gill, Mr. Filippo, our transportation center, our facility center, that we will get it done and make sure Horseheads is continuing on its strong path. So thank you, everybody. This is it.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the opening of the 23-24 school budget. Tonight we'll go over, as we typically start our meetings, with the governor's proposal and where we stand on our aid. We'll go over our starting point of our revenue and expenditures. I'm also going to present a discussion to you on our current debt and our future borrowing options that we have. And then we'll kick it off with the transportation and HR departments on our department overview. So the governor released a timely budget proposal this year. School aid is $34 billion, which includes a $2.7 billion increase in foundation aid. This formula is now fully funded. For years and years, the formula existed, but it was never used. Districts were underfunded. A couple years ago, legislation was put into effect that there was going to be a 2-year phase-in. That 2-year phase-in is now complete, and the formula is fully funded. Included in the foundation aid this year is a $2 million set-aside. So it's not $250 million in addition, it's $250 million within the total foundation aid. And it's set aside for high-impact tutoring. All expense-driven aids are fully funded. In the past, we've seen various proposals trying to combine them or come up with a different formula. The formulas are intact based on expenditures actually made and fully funded. Not included in the budget was universal free meals. There was a lot of advocacy for this during the federal pandemic. Meals were paid for. There was a push at the state level to include this in the budget. This time it did not make it. And Dr. Douglas already mentioned this one previously. New reporting mandate is due August 1st regarding the progress of our implementation of zero-emission buses. This reporting will include things like the capacity of our electrical grids, the number of charging stations, our workforce training, number of buses currently purchased, and number of buses anticipated to be purchased in the next 2 years. School aid, it should be noted, increased a total of 10% in this budget proposal. It was a very ambitious increase in the budget this year. It's not anticipated those levels are going to maintain going forward, likely going down in the area of maybe 4% or so in future out years. So regarding the high impact tutoring set aside, we don't know much. This was included in the budget, but no specifics are really given on how we can use this money. But the facts that we do know is to deliver smaller individual group tutoring for reading and math for grades 3 through 8 for those kids that the district designates as falling below state standards. So it's not the state that's going to make that designation, it's an internal decision. The sessions have the flexibility of when they're offered. They must be offered twice a week. The legislation was written that they are to supplement current resources, not to replace the supplant them. So there's a lot of questions regarding how we can use those funds, how it ties into the current federal ESSER funding that has the same similar use, and if we can use this money to continue what those plans are. So we will wait further guidance if this comes to fruition in the final budget. So before I move on to the next slide, I want to have a conversation about our current debt and some of the borrowing options that we have before us. As we know, we're in an environment where interest rates are continuing to increase. We are not immune to those interest rate increases. So currently we have a short-term borrowing that we renew each year. This is for our initial $94 million authorization. So to give you some context, when we did last year, this time when we were doing the budget, interest was budgeted at 1%. We're now creeping up to 4%. So we are feeling the impacts of that interest rate for sure. Typically, there's an option of a short-term note and then there's an option of a long-term note. Typically, the benefit of a short-term note is interest rates are less than the long-term notes, and we're starting to see them creep closer and closer together and maybe even surpassing it. So we need to consider if the short-term note is still our best avenue or if we want to continue some other options. So we could convert our short-term debt to a long-term bond on the traditional market. that would lock in the interest rate and continue our building aid as it currently is calculated. Or we have an option to go through the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. This is a New York Public Finance and Construction Authority for the municipal bond market. It provides financing opportunities for public entities within New York. We have thrown our hat into this at this point in time. It's better to have our name in the pool and be a part of it and pull out later than decide this is something we want to do and we've missed the deadline to get ourselves in there. So if we move forward with this bond, we would be part of a 1.3 or 1.4 billion dollar bond that would be called the New York School Pool. So how the Dormitory Authority works, it's multiple entities throw themselves into this pool, and it goes out with one mass borrowing. So we wouldn't be participating on our own, it would be with various entities within New York State. The benefits of this, there's a couple benefits. So one, it would lock in our interest rate to protect ourselves from rising interest rates going forward. It is anticipated that there will be additional interest rate increases in March and June of this year. Not sure yet if there'll be increases in September and December. That decision will be made over the summer. And then as far as 2024 goes, the economists are kind of in a mixed bag right now if interest rates are going to hold or if they're going to continue to rise, depending on how the market's reacting, or if we'll start to see that decline. So locking in the interest rate would protect ourselves from any of those future rate increases on our short-term note. And there's also the benefit of an increase in our building aid if we go through the DASNY. If we went through a traditional borrowing through the private market, our building aid would remain as currently calculated from New York State. But there's legislation that if you borrow through the Dormitory Authority and say that talk to each other and there's an agreement for those entities that the building aid is recalculated using a blended rate on the state aid, which presents an opportunity for additional building aid over and above what we are currently receiving. The DASNY bonds are callable, so 8 to 10 years into the debt, there's usually a call option. So if we saw that it'd be advantageous to refinance at a lower rate at that time, we'd have the opportunity to do so. We wouldn't be tied to any other member in the pool. That's something we could do as a standalone. So it's not a majority of borrowers in the pool or anything like that. DASNY may also offer on their own to offer a refunding opportunity if the market is favorable to its pool of members. Any questions on this piece before I move on? I can attempt to answer. Yes.
Have we seen a max of where interest rate has been, say like in 2008, when things are crazy? Like, are we looking at like 10, 20, if it continues to rise? I know you're guessing at that.
I don't recall the rates from 2008. I can certainly tell you that history for you. But since we've started our capital projects, we've had that benefit of some very favorable interest rates.
The DASNY rates are about 4%. I don't know what's long term.
Yep, so the rate of the issuance is roughly the same. It's the traditional market. It's that benefit of the additional building aid to kind of compress what you're paying versus what you're getting back to lessen the local share. Okay, so moving forward in the presentation.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, you're okay.
So it seems like what you presented is there's a lot of upside to being part of this DASNY.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any substantial downside that we need to weigh against all the substantial upside?
Sure.
You'll see it as she goes through the next
All
several
right.
slides.
So there's some other slide with that?
Yeah, but to your point, the principal and interest payments on a short-term note is different than what principal and interest payments look like on long-term notes. So short-term notes typically have a smaller principal payment due, where the long-term notes have typically a larger amortized principal payment. So there is, I don't want to say it's a negative, but it's a consideration to look at what our actual debt service is and how that impacts our budget overall.
If I can jump in just real quick, Kate. One of the things as the board goes through this next, this is one of the things Katie and I have talked about. You're going to see that blue line and that purple line. once we make a decision, which doesn't have to be made tonight, we've got to pick one or the other, but you need to understand that we can't finalize this until we know which route we go. So, and that will deal at the end with what potential levy is the 2%. Under no circumstance are we putting up anything that requires an override vote. We will be at the most at the 2% required tax levy limit that the governor's put into place, which only requires a simple majority.
Okay, so as Dr. Douglas said, I'm trying to make these presentation as simplified as possible. There will be a DASME option on each slide and a ban option. There's bond anticipation note, that's the short-term note, to give both scenarios of what our 23-24 impact would be. So regarding the foundation aid, we did receive a $2.1 million increase in our foundation aid. That is per the formula, about a 9% increase for the school district. It was a welcome surprise when initially the proposal was rolled out. We were expecting $700,000 in the 23-24 year, but there was an inflation factor that was built into the formula. So instead of the $700,000, we're up to $2.1. Transportation aid is calculated in-house based on our anticipated expenses for the 22-23 school year. So we are expecting an increase in transportation aid of $221,000. Building aid also calculated in-house based on the projects that have been filed with state ed and receiving building aid. Currently this time for the 22-23 school year, we are currently receiving all anticipated building aid for the first referendum. So that is all completely within this number. We did see a decrease in our building aid. We had, I think, 8 projects reach their last year of aid payment, reducing those payments in half. So with the ban option, our building aid is expected to be $7.4 million. If we went through DASME, there's about a $260,000 difference in aid that we would see each year. So the building aid through DASME would be $7.7 million. BOCES aid, based on the cost of services we're expecting this year, we're expecting an increase up to $5 million. Other aid items includes our excess cost aid, which is the aid we get on our special education services, and our textbook and instructional materials aid. That increase represents the increase in the instructional materials aid. The excess cost aid at this time I held flat. Questar BOCES is the one that calculates that staff payment for us, and we're currently working on that calculation. So DASME scenario, we would see a total increase in state aid of almost $2.5 million. If we went with the ban option, our building aid would be, or excuse me, our total state aid would increase by $2.2 million. Onto the tax cap. As we know, we are limited to the rate of inflation or 2%, whichever is less. We are obviously at 2%. At the time of that determination, the CPI was at 8%, and we're bound by 2%. Our current tax-based growth factor is 1.0047, down from 1.0095. This is a factor that's calculated at the state level based on our assessment growth. And in order to challenge the tax cap, we would need a 60% supermajority vote to do so. So looking at the column on the right for 23-24, the calculation starts with our current levy from the 22-23 school year up to $41,781,000. That growth factor is then applied as a multiplier, adjusting the levy amount to $41,978,092. We take our pilots from the prior year, those are added back in, adjusting the levy further to $42,508,451. Next is where that growth factor comes in, the 2%, increasing the levy to $43,358,620. We subtract that out, we have the pilots that we're anticipating for 23-24. Those are calculated based on the pilot agreements themselves, which brings us to $42,762,235. Second half of the calculation is where we apply the capital exclusion. That's the piece of the calculation that takes all of our capital expenditures, such as all of our debt on our capital projects, the debt on our buses, any funds that we're transferring from the general fund to the capital fund. So for the 22, 23, the flip side of that, we're going to move on, is offset by any aid that we're anticipating to receive on those capital expenditures. So our building aid, a calculation for transportation aid, for applying any of our debt service reserve, that would also go into the formula. So for 22, 23, we did not have a capital exclusion, which means the aid side exceeded the debt side. So there's no exclusion to levy taxes on for the current year. So our levy was 41,781,717. Going through the DASNY option, we do have a capital exclusion for the DASNY option, which means our debt, this calculation, is greater than the aid anticipated. This is in large part due to the increase in the interest rate, going from that 1% to the 4%. As I stated earlier, and we'll see it later on when we talk about the budget side, the DASNY debt is also greater than the BAM debt by about $1.3 million. So that is incorporated into this as well. So because the expense side exceeds the aid side, we are able to levy a tax on that if we so choose. So that would bring the total levy up to $45,903,282, which is an increase of 4.1 or 9.86. I want to be clear, this does not include any amounts of debt service reserve that we've used in the past. The last few years, we've used $630,000. This is not incorporated into this now. Any use of the debt service reserve would bring that percentage in the levy increase down. The ban option, similar situation where the expense side exceeds the aid side. Again, in this scenario, it's mainly due to the increase in interest. So this would realize an increase of almost $3 million or 7.18.
Warren, your questions before?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I guess for me, given your caveat that the 9.86% and the 7.8 or 7.18%, we're not going to touch, right? We're not going there. You said the maximum was 2%.
No,
right?
that is the 2%.
Oh, that's the 2%.
Yes, remember, every year, 2% is not 2%. Like, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, we went out at 6.1 or 6.9%, but it's the 2% levy.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
2% is the levy factor. It's kind of a misnomer
Yeah.
almost. It's
Yeah, I
not 2%.
understand that.
Yeah.
I understand.
The hard part is, if we go back to that slide, with the,
The first one?
remember, that 2% allowable levy growth factor, that's CPI. We can only be at a maximum of 2.
Right, okay.
CPI was actually 6.1. So officially, for the board and districts all over the place, to keep up with our costs, labor, all those consumer price index pieces, that number should be there. Can you imagine what those numbers would look like then? So schools are capped, but we're only capped at your decision. And that cap is, if you go above the numbers that are just there, we must have a supermajority of the voters approve it. So you're not capped, it's a misnomer. But I'm here to tell you, we should not be looking at a supermajority.
So a summary of budgeted revenues at this point in time, tax items, that includes our levy, pilot payments, any penalties and interest. This number does not at this point include anything regarding an increase to the levy. We're holding it flat until we have a decision later on, and where we'd like the levy to be. That $61,000 change is due to the increase in the pilot payments. State aid, we went through on a prior slide. Those are the two scenarios of the increase in state aid. Other revenue includes interest admissions, rental income, stop loss insurance, The $250,000 increase is primarily due to an increase in our BOCES refund. So total revenues is at the bottom. You see the two scenarios. BASNY's $89 million, or a $2.8 million increase versus the band anticipated revenue of almost 89, a little less than 89, or 2.5 million. So on to the expenditure side. So as you all are aware at this point in time, the budget process at this point is to roll the budget over and build in all the contractual increases and all like the known factors that we need to increase into the budget at this time. And that's our starting point where we then begin to start peeling away and finding the savings. Within the salary lines, it includes all the contractual increases for our collective bargaining groups. We started this with the 22-23 budgets. We are working on building in the positions that we funded through the federal stimulus fund. As part of our sustainability plan, if we're able to build them in the general fund, to have that money there when that federal money dries up. And that includes funds for 4 teaching assistants, 2 social workers, an RTI teacher, and the intermediate school guidance counselor. Little new to the process this year is the process of budget considerations. What we've done in the past is present them department by department and then add them in over time. We've built them all in right from the get-go. They will still be presented by each department. Both of them will be presented by Tony at the end of March in the instructional budget. But we've built them all in now just to have that starting point and have that opportunity to peel them back later if we feel we need to. Benefits increased by $876,000, mainly due to increases in ERS, TRS, Social Security costs that are calculated based on the amount of salaries, offset by the increase in employee contributions that we expect to receive from the staff. Debt service, this is where you're going to see that difference between the DASB debt and the band debt. So the DASB debt, because it is a higher borrowing, we're going right to that principal and interest payment. So $9.8 million would be the total amount of our debt, including the debt we went through DASB. So that would be an increase of $3.4 million. If we opted to stay with the band, which does include the appropriate amount of interest, if we opted to stay with the band, $8.4 million or $2 million increase. BOCE services went up $1.6 million. This was in large part due to our special education services. We are servicing more kids through the BOCE program, and we've also seen some pretty sizable increases in the cost of the programs that they offer and the cost of the related services. But as we do with the BOCE services, we'll continue to review the BOCE budget and fine-tune and make any adjustments we need throughout the budget process. Included also in the BOCES number is a $50,000 increase to support our laptop replacement cycle. Dr. Douglas mentioned that earlier. As we continue our one-to-one initiative, we have to keep up with the replacement cycle. So if there's additional funds included to keep up with that, as well as $50,000 to put towards a pot of money to replace some of the aging Promethean boards in our classrooms. But the equipment supplies and contractual is up for a variety of reasons. One, as we all know, we're feeling the inflationary impacts on our transportation parts and supplies, our facilities parts and supplies. We've had to increase several lines to keep up with the cost of those items. Energy is up quite a bit as well. We had to adjust the budget to keep up with the cost of energy, and we've had to adjust the budget to keep up with the cost of fuel. We've also included an increase for the SRO contract that we've been working to finalize with the village for the addition of the new SROs in the program. And then lastly, the transfers, capital outlay. So this is transfers to, transfers to our school lunch, our special aid fund, and our capital fund. The $250,000 increase represents an increase to our transfer to capital, so we can continue to do those smaller one-off annual projects to keep up with some routine items within the district. So bottom line, DASNY expenditures, expenditures with DASNY, total $98 million or $9.7 million increase. Band expenditures are 96.8, total expenditures including the band are 96.8 million or $8.3 million increase. So taking the components for both the DASNY scenario and the band scenario, we are opening with a budget gap of 9.1 or $8 million. Again, this does not include any of the tax levy dollars. That will be a decision that will be incorporated later on. As always, we have our reserve funds and fund balance to use and consider as tools. And now starts the process of fine-tuning the budget and sharpening the pencil and looking at every nook and cranny to find where we can find those savings, as best we can.
So if you look at this, this is why we'll end up needing a decision. Blue column or the purple column. One has one levy, one has the other. But remember, we try to talk to people about, it's not about the levy. The levy only means a change in amount of number. What is important to our homeowners and our residents of this district is very simply the tax rate. Because the tax rate, we will be able to give you a little more of an estimate maybe at the next meeting, if not by the middle of March. Once we get assessment data, as Katie does every year, we take whatever we have there and look at how it's most likely going to play out in the end if the budget's approved on a conservative estimate. And that's a chart we usually show you at the end that is shown almost every single year. Whatever we put up, the rate has dropped from where we projected it, except for, I think it was 2006. And that was the year they took all gas wells off the assessments. But we will bring that information because this is the hard part until we know. What happens if you go with DASNY with all the upsides? Yes, a higher levy. But if our growth factor says that, say that 9% levy might equal a rate of 1% or 0, we just don't know. But say it says 0. That means no tax increase as long as you did not improve your home. Right? Versus 8 million, that is 7%, different calculation, and a rate that might be 0, it could be less than 0. That's been our trend. We don't know. The range here could keep us closer to that bottom. We just don't know until we know that assessment. So we'd ask you to think about that, and as we get closer to understanding the assessments, we would be able to come back to you to let you know where we project rates on. And the one good thing I think the board knows is over 8 years we've been together, Katie's conservative projections have usually borne out that even her conservative has been more conservative than what actually mirrored it out. One time she said we'd be between, I think it was 2% and 0, and we ended up being negative 1.4. Right? That's good. We'd rather be lower. That does nothing but help our community. And that's the path that we still want to try to stay on. So until we know more, it's hard to know which route to go.
And it should be noted that between the DASNY and the band gaps, that if you apply their respective tax levy, they each had a separate calculation, a different levy increase. Once that is applied to each scenario, it becomes gap neutral. The gaps become the same. So it's not that one is creating a gap between our budget and our revenue source. They end up being the same. So it comes down to how large of a budget increase we want to present and what our tax levy increase is where the board is comfortable. And again, we haven't used any of the debt service monies yet in the calculation, which will only bring that percentage down. We still have the revenue source of that debt service fund to meet the budgetary needs.
This may be one of those years that we want to use a little more fund balance and then reset. So those are all tools that we have. Just until we know that, we don't want to commit one way or another. Does that sound okay with the board? And we'll probably look for some type of decision either think it's March 2nd or March 16th.
Just one clarifying question on the band rates. So let's say 2 years from now, the interest rates go from 4% back to 1%, kind of what we've been living the last 8 years or so. If we knew that was going to happen, and we don't know that's going to happen, but if we knew that was going to happen and if it did happen, would the band direction be the better way to go, or would it still be really, really close?
So with our $94 million borrowing, which is the one we're ferreting out here, in a couple of years, we will have to go to a bond. Bands typically can be renewed for 5 years, but because of COVID, there's a 2-year extension for a 7 year. So in a couple of years, we're going to reach the point where we have to convert to a long-term bond. The debt at the time of that conversion is likely to be the same debt level of the DASNY bond that we're looking at. This is principal and interest will be pretty similar. So we only have a year or two left on the band, so it's just what's going to happen between now and the time we convert.
The real question is just like you said. With everything that went on today in the stock markets, right? There's sort of, we're coming off inflation, but all of a sudden we're hitting this little crest. They predict that they'll do more things to make that go down, which ultimately will affect interest rates just when. And right now the market's not reacting normally where you have this, the rates usually go up. They went up, but now they're settling again, and that's against all odds. If you had a crystal ball and you knew 2 years out when we're going to have to do it, it's below 4, which there's probably a good chance of that, but that's the hard part.
Backing up to when you were talking about the budget from the governor, is there the opportunity for that budget to be amended to add in the free lunches for all, or is that off the table?
That's where I was today.
Okay.
Okay. There is movement on it, but it's not part of the budget. It's part of the state saying we're just going to fund it. It's still too early to say because the horse trading hasn't sort of started yet. But there's a lot more people that are for it now than we're saying, well, it's 220 million, we don't have that money. They're getting a lot of pressure finally that they're saying that's probably the wisest 220 million we could spend. So if anybody's out there, please keep putting that pressure on because they are seeing that it is starting to move the needle. Big thing about the governor's numbers, we don't expect them to go down. They could all of a sudden go down. If any year that they're going to go down, this could be a year. I don't think the political will is to do that. It's always been to add more, but because of that universal meal, I don't think there's the political will of doing that and then adding more to school funding. So it's sort of, which the devil's is going to be in the detail on what the final is.
I think just a recommendation, and I know we don't have that chart up here tonight because we don't know what those assessments are going to be, but even if we don't know that for the next meeting, I think having that chart that shows the history of the levy and what the rate is, I think it'll just help for anybody who's watching this, right? Because people are probably, anybody's at home watching it and they're seeing the 7% and 9%, and they're automatically thinking, oh my gosh, my taxes are going to go up by 9%, right? And it's not always clear, so just being able to see that, even if we don't have that estimate.
I have the chart on this presentation, I believe it's just hidden. Can you unhide it at the end?
That's
Yeah,
always my favorite part.
Yeah, I mean, it may not be the most current, but it's one of our ones.
Just to.
Yeah, it shows the levy, the
Right, 'cause
percentages.
it's not always clear, unless you really know the details.
Sue, can you go over and see if you can unhide it real quick?
And I did get assessments from the county, but they're really preliminary now.
Right.
They're not good numbers really
Right.
to even begin to rough.
Right,
So
right.
check back and.
But even
Yeah.
just looking at.
Did they show any growth?
2022 and early.
Too preliminary.
Oh, darn, can't get her in it. See, that's why she's very conservative with me. There's the chart right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can go up beforehand to both of those, the tax rate comparison. What's being shown right now is the tax rate comparison as of last year, before we had a major reduction from 1732. But as you can see, if somebody lives in Elmira, their houses are being charged at a $1,000 value, $20.88 last year. Ours were being charged the same value, $17.32 per thousand. Elmira's went up. I think they're at almost 2105 or 2106. Ours went to 1604. That's what I mean. That's the history. We will show this. If you, I mean, the difference in money of $1 is like $1 in difference between it is like $2 to $4 million in additional funding we would have if we use their rates, which nobody would want to do. That's why we're very proud of what we've done with our rates, and we want to continue. So we'll have that to show the history, and you can see where it's gone down. Okay, the next slide. This is what Ms. Dale was talking about. This is our tax levy and tax rate. In 2021, we had a levy change of about 1.31%, but the rate actually with assessment went down to negative 0.22. In other words, everybody saw a 40 cent per thousand. Is it 40 cents per 4 cents per thousand? 40 cents per $100,000 reduction. Not a lot. But when you look up at 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, you can start seeing the major shifts. Now all of a sudden where we were at $18.21, then we went to $17.32 and $21.22. In 22-23, we went to $16.04. So that was $1. I think it was $1.28. So a $100,000 home saved last year $128 in their taxes. 200,000, just multiply by 2. 300,000, multiply that. That's what this board has been doing. That even if you had a rate that all of a sudden said was a 3% rate, that means $16.04 or 16 cents times 3 is 30 plus 18, that's 48 cents, or $48 would be the tax on a $100,000 home increase if it played out that way. We'll be able to tell you more what we expect. And there's one time where it went up, what was it, 2016, 15, 16, and 16? 15, 16 was the one time it reversed on us, but we went from 1784 to 1804. It was basically a 1.12% increase, which was basically a 17.8 cent tax increase on $1,000. So that's why tax rate is the number you have to look at, not the levy. The levy only tells you the amount of change. Tax rate tells you how it impacts your bottom line. So we'll update that and bring it in current.
If there's no other questions on the overall budget, at this point, I'll turn it over to Rich Nicolata and Jason Johnson from the Transportation Department.
Thank you all very much. So Katie's gone ahead and put our first overview slide up. First item there is salaries is an additional slide, so I'm going to jump over that right now. The next increase that we're looking at that we'd like to explain is the fuel lines, our line for fuel. And again, you all know and all feel this, you're all putting gas, trying to put gas in your cars and what it's costing you out of your own pocket. We project this year, on the 2022-23 school year, of about 180,000 gallons of fuel. That's both unleaded and diesel fuel. Roughly about 80,000 of that is diesel, 100,000 is unleaded fuel. We don't anticipate using more fuel next year in this budget, but we are just trying to show you what that cost per gallon would be. If you look at, well, the first thing also I need to mention is that we did look at any kind of source we could as far as discounting. Obviously, there's quantity discounting. We looked at the state contract. We ultimately went with the DCMO BOCES bid process for the best rate for the quantity that we purchased. But if we just take one example of looking at the diesel rate, in the 21-22 year when we put together this package, you were looking at a fixed rate for diesel of $2.02 per gallon. This year, they're looking at a fixed rate of diesel of $3.58 a gallon. So you're looking at approximately $1.50 difference. And then if we're looking at 80,000 gallons of diesel, obviously at the $1.50 rate, that's why we're seeing the increase that we are in the fuel line. Also talk a little bit about parts and supplies. Again, we're not anticipating buying more items, buying more parts to the buses. It's just what the cost of all that's going to cost us. So just a couple of quick examples. There are four primary areas that we're seeing this in: oil, tires, lubricants, and basic bus parts. So if you look at tires, for example, bus has 6 tires. And again, it's a little different. You can pull into Walmart and try to get new tires on your car for what, $175? Maybe if you have an SUV, maybe $200. 1 year ago, a new tire for a school bus was $452. This year, as of this month, it's $572. So you're looking at almost about $125 additional. The tire is not bigger, it's not better. We're not ordering more tires. That's just what we're coming across. That's on the big size, and that's looking at dollars. And I always like, when I'm teaching bus drivers, I always like visual examples. Air hose. Okay, there's 6 of them on a bus. They have gone up 24%. Now that may only be $4 per hose, but all this is adding up. 24% on all the lights inside the bus is what's causing the increase. Shock absorbers are up 26%, and I think that was about $20. That is all added to our parts and supplies. Where's Jason? There you go. So if we then move on to our next slide, you're looking at the salary positions. A lot of this is what Mr. Pizzetti had said before, was a lot of our increase here is just basic contractual rates with our unions. I do want to point out a little bit about the increase in the substitutes, extra pay, field line. What we're trying to do is our payroll is getting in a little bit more in line with our post-COVID adjustments of what we're seeing. Some of that is training. Our training line is a little bit more. Obviously, it's handling, trying to fill in all our vacancies, but one little item is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the FMCSA, is now involved with the training process. So for us to train a new bus driver to get their CDL, we are now logged in with the federal government. We now have to follow their guidelines, their training, and then when we want someone to go to the DMV to take the road test, we actually have to get a certificate and get the blessing of the feds on that. That's not all of this, but that's just one example of what the federal and state requirements are for us and how it kind of costs us all when you have to make the tough decisions. We have a little bit extra with Traversa, trying to get that into play and making sure that we're up and running on that. Now that we're out of COVID, we're seeing a lot more of our midday runs increase. A lot with BOCES runs, EOP therapy runs. We're doing some nursing program with BOCES, that's midday runs, child development program. Again, some of the stuff that's falling in that line that we're seeing the increase trying to get. These are all great programs, don't get me wrong, but these kids got to get to the programs and we got to bus them there. So, all part of the mix. Additional floating attendants. We have 2 floating attendants that this board were kind enough to approve in years past. This is two staff members, and we're asking for a third one, that are trained in student management, de-escalation skills, student behavior, to be on a bus to help with the student behavior. The better we control student behavior, the better that bus driver is in driving that bus. Attendants and monitors, one of their big roles that when we talk about this in state training, is that's part of it, is making sure that there's less distractions for the driver. It's not just like they always say, well, the school bus is an extension of the classroom. Well, the rules and the regulations in SED may be, but a driver can't do what a teacher does. They can't get out of their seat. Obviously, you know better, you're looking at a classroom of 15 to 20 kids. Bus driver may have 40 or 50. Still has to drive the bus. Now, what I like to try to say, and I think I met with the board a couple of years ago, was we talked about how a bus driver has to look at their kids in their student passenger mirror. And I get a lot of, well, why can't the bus driver control the bus? Why isn't the bus driver taking care of these kids? Because you are all the bus drivers. When you look in your mirror, this is what you see. You see a top of the head, and when the student wants to know if they can get away with something, they're going to pop up their eyes a little bit, and then they're going to be down. 44-inch back seats required by DOT. So what we're asking for you, for your consideration, is think about adding another monitor that can walk up and down the bus, that can see what's going on behind that seat, keep the peace to make our rides safe for our kids.
I need 80. But we can't afford that right now, so we're trying to build over that.
Bus replacement proposition. Again, I think as this was explained before, we're looking at 6 full-size buses, 1 wheelchair, and also 1 microbird. We're still in the basic neighborhood of that 4 to 6 buses consistently that we've been doing every year. Still in that $1.4, $1.7 million range. Jason has a replacement program, so we're still trying to keep these buses so there's not any greater length than 10 years. We see a lot more increasing expenses in their maintenance when we're over that. We're still trying to keep them at warranty rates of about 100,000 miles. So hopefully this is just a continuation process of what we've done before. That shows you a little bit of the bus history. What we're looking at this year is, last year you're looking at about an average cost of a bus of $188,000. This year it's $196,000 and change for a school bus. At this point in time, I want to talk a little bit, and I'm not going to do much because Dr. Douglas covered a lot, that eventually we're going to have to come to you, and the superintendent are going to have to make some decisions on electric buses. Electric buses, Dr. Douglas said, is in the neighborhood of $460,000. We're in the process of trying to do our due diligence to be able to present you facts, figures, and anticipation of what we would have to do to meet those state requirements, the 2027 and the 2035 as being dictated by the state. We've had numerous training sessions already. We've had 2 in-house sessions with New York Bus Sales and Girardin Energy. That's also included administrators and our facilities department, because ultimately there's going to have to be some physical changes to the lot and the chargers and everything that Dr. Douglas had said. And we're trying to be able to be as quickly educated as we can to answer your questions when it comes to this. We have started one of the first items on a checklist of things that they suggest we do, and that's called a fleet study. So the fleet study is going on right now with Girardin Energy. And what we're really looking at, just to kind of give you a little bit of a flavor, is they're looking at our routes, and they're looking at the length of time. Are they going up hills? Are they going down hills? They're taking into consideration the weather conditions that we have, because that all has an effect on an electric bus. They say it's 125 miles, but the experts that build these things say, no, you have cold weather, you have hot weather, you're maybe now in the neighborhood of 80 miles in a full charge. Then all of a sudden you have a driver that is aggressive on the throttle. Now that goes down on the percentage. Then there's also the aspect that you all feel, and you hopefully, well not hopefully, but I do, when you're charging your phone. The longer you charge it in, it degrades the battery. The longer it's charged in, over 100%, it degrades the battery. The quicker charge you put on your phone, it degrades the battery. All that falls true for an electric bus as well. And we have to be able to answer those questions. And other questions, when we charge a bus, and the bus comes back in the morning at 8:30, can we charge it up to the right level needed to do that 1:45, 2 o'clock bus run? If we can't, are we going to have to change the route? Are we going to have to buy more buses? Those are decisions that you have to have the information to be prepared to make when that time comes, and we are in the process of trying to learn all that. And that's what we hope to have come out of the fleet study in that process.
Yeah. You said that your during the day runs are increasing on posts and whatever. How is that accounted for in that charge? So you're charging during that time. Those buses are separate then to your morning and afternoon runs, or how would that impact those charges?
Part of the fleet study will determine that, but it's kind of like putting together a puzzle. We would have to take a run that has a short number of miles in the morning and then use that also to do a midday run. And then the other thing that will come out of the study is we could charge them with a quick charge. A quick charge is a higher cost. It's a higher cost to put in, it's a higher cost to buy, and sometimes will degrade the 8-year warranty on it. So this is going to be all some massive puzzle that we're going to have to put the pieces together, and that will be part of your tough decisions when we're able to put that package together.
The real issue is, I cannot, as a superintendent or the board, have a situation where we're in school and I have to move those kids. I need my buses. So no matter what the study says, we have to have the highest level of charging capability on every bus. Because if half our fleet does long runs and they come in, and I don't have that ability to quick charge, I might not have them for the afternoon. So it's all of that balancing. The only way we're assured to have those buses is to have the quick charging and the capacity to bring that much electrical current into our bus garages. Yes.
And then what happens if there's an emergency dismissal, right? Like,
Yeah.
are you able to turn over quick
There is
enough
no guarantee that you
2
can.
hours into the day, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
there's like a major evacuation, right?
The only chargers on all the buses that will be that level 3 charger at $80,000 a pop. Because the study would say, well, you can have 20 of these, 5 of these. Well, if I still need 70 buses, it doesn't matter whether I got 20 chargers or not. My big thing is I can't have a bus go out and then just stop
Right.
because there's no more charging.
Or not available to pick up
Yes.
kids in case of emergency.
And that poses all kinds of uniquenesses because our fleets are probably going to have to get bigger because of this reason. If I've sent somebody out all day and all afternoon for our routes, and I've got to send somebody to, say, Norwich in the middle of winter, there is no guarantee that bus will get back. That's why we said they should amend the rules to say that we should have some type of gas, or even go to the mid group and say a hybrid version of a bus, that if the charge goes down, they have the gas to back it up. Unfortunately, that's where we're trying to push them to amend the legislation. That's going to be the problem. And as you can see, just $1.6 million, that's 4.1 if we went electric. I do not believe our district will pass that referendum. And as soon as I lose aid, now the district has to pay for it 100% for the next 5 years. Because once you break that cycle. And I do not believe any elected official really gives a damn about it. The main reason is it's the power authority that's doing it, not the elected official. And that power authority
gets to set rates and everything else, and they're appointed by the governor. So it's the governor and that group that says they can do it. You've already heard they're doing that, and it's just like they're saying you can no longer replace your forced air furnace on gas after a certain date, and you will not be able to build a house with gas appliances in it after a certain date because they corrected it and said those that already have it are exempt at least. But there's going to be a lot of nonas and mamas and dadas that cook that won't like that. This is just the start of this one authority that has absolute power, and it's not legislative control.
So I just wanted to dip the toe in the water, in the battery acid, if you will, about what's coming up. And all the stuff that means there'll be additional driver training involved, community outreach. Jason has worked with first responders. There's a special way in a bonding that we've had with our first responders on going after, or if they had to fight some reason a fire with a gas or diesel bus. Now we're going to have to do that again. It's a whole different thing. Long list. I won't bore you anymore. That is my budget presentation for today. Are there any other transportation questions that I could answer? Yes.
So, for the Raptor system, does your budget cover like the iPads and the training, or will that come out of someone else's budget? You may not know that.
For the Raptor or for the Traverse?
Traverse.
That,
Traverse.
yes.
Well, for Traverse right now, that is in the budget for just this upcoming year.
Okay.
It is going to be the tablets. The tablets are actually now on the buses with the drivers, so they are now using them, getting used to them, the turn-by-turns and the GPS. So we have a staged system, and that's where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Yes?
So it looks like the average cost of a bus continues to go up, and you projected that it's gonna go up in this. Is that all inflation driven, or are there any extra features that are being added to buses that make them safer or different than in previous years?
In some cases, they have been. I think that would be maybe something I would toss over to Jason a little bit. In some cases, we've reduced some things, not safety related, but we were buying the luggage areas, luggage coach underneath the buses, and they were on all the buses, and they're really not used because of regulation purposes, except for athletic events and trips. So not every bus has to have one. Basically, every third bus that we use for trips. So we've tried to take those little items out to try to reduce the cost of the bus. But unfortunately, all the other things going on. Do you want to highlight a couple of safety items the past couple of years? I don't think there have been.
No, nothing's changed over the past 2 or 3 years. So we've adjusted some things, some new safety and emissions and things of that nature. But right now, the price that you see in here, that is without any adjustments to any new technology or anything. The supply and demand, everything is affecting it. Even getting the buses on time right now is an issue across the country.
And the thing just to highlight, if I could, is this is not like, okay, we're just buying it, it's the cost of living, things are going up. A unleaded gas bus is less than a diesel bus. So we've been slowly converting the fleet from a diesel fleet to an unleaded gas fleet to keep the apples to apples, the rate down. And even though we're trying to find savings when we buy these buses, we are getting outpaced by the industry in the cost of actually putting them all together. So I just don't want you to think that we're not trying. And that was one of the major reasons why the decision was to stay with the unleaded. Unleaded's a little less than the diesel right now, so that makes fiscal sense. The cost of a bus unleaded is $7,000-8,000 less. So they're just the industry and the production costs are just outpacing us. Anything else?
So supply chain issues, you hear that term all the time. Is that part of this also?
Supply chain issues for us have been timing. Normally we get all our 7 buses, the 7-8 buses in the summer. We order them roughly in about October. We get them during the summer. This past summer, we did not get all our buses. Right now, we are still 2 special needs buses short because of the supply chain problem. And the manufacturers are telling us they hope not to have that next year. That's not necessarily adding to the price so much right now, but adding to the timing of rotating our fleet.
Warren, if I can add real quick, Warren. The big thing is like our automobiles we had today, they had a supplier of the microchip issue. So that was a major issue. Thousands of vehicles were all over the country. It's the same thing with buses. They have thousands of buses at all the big 3 manufacturers in the country that are sitting in a lot with parts missing still. And they cannot deliver them throughout the country. Until they get those parts, and they can start delivering. We're still backlogged.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Very informative.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. We'll get the seat out of the way.
I was wondering if there was any more props anywhere.
Right.
Stop on the camera.
Air hose, right?
Yes, yeah, and we're gonna use the seat too.
All right, Caitlin, want to come up and close us out?
I was commenting to Tony that the transportation team are always a tough act to follow. I just want to put everyone on notice right now that when our E-fleet of buses come in, I am going to be petitioning the Chemung County Civil Service Commission that the title for a bus operator be changed from driver to conductor. So, looking into the HR budget, you can see the numbers up there. The first line is salaries. That's the largest item in our budget. It encompasses a director, myself, 2 confidential clericals, and also 2 benefits specialists. There's a contractual amount that is budgeted for 23-24 of $358 through $339. Equipment and supplies stays steady from what is budgeted last year at $2250. Contractual also stays steady, $6857. For a reminder of what goes into that line, that would be the Affordable Care Act consultant, which is Paragon. Our benefits consultants, they've been specialists. We've been working very hard to see what we might be able to do, rather than have an outside consultant do our Affordable Care Act calculation. So what they do is they do a calculation for our health care that we provide to all staff members to figure out whether it meets minimum thresholds, and then to figure out whether it meets the affordability standards, and then generate the 1095Cs that you all get this time of year for your tax reports. So we are investigating how to move that in-house. We think we're there. We think we're going to be able to do that. So Katie is going to be looking into how we might be able to extricate ourselves from the contract with the private consultant, which is $45,000. EAP, our Employee Assistance Program, is also in this line, and that is budgeted for $17,000. Clinical Associate of the Southern Tier has been our provider of this free and confidential counseling for family members and staff. For the past few years, they were recently acquired by Pathways. Service still is excellent. Location still right where they need them, convenient to our staff members, so we would like to stay with them. Professional fees and contract items, that 18,400 line, that includes fees for SANES, which is an administrators organization, ASBO, which is a school business leaders organization, MASLA, which is management advocates for school labor affairs, and NISBA. The conference line, 10,140, that is basically budgeted money that's in our different collective bargaining agreements to account for conference expenses that people within those units might take throughout the year. And the last line, BOCES, so this number of the 227,590 is based upon the preliminary BOCES budget, and it encompasses a number of services that the BOCES provides for us. One is health and safety, which we have a full-time health and safety hygienist on staff. His name is Tony Stager. It encompasses trainings for bloodborne pathogens and right to know each year, indoor air quality testing, water testing, fire inspections, and this year I'm putting Tony to work to help us lend some of his expertise in developing changes to and updates to the safety plan that we adopt each year. It also includes our collective advertising and COSER, and also drug and alcohol testing, COSER and FOCES. Also in this line is OLAS. So that is our recruiting platform that we just recently moved to, and our site is now live, and we are working to get our vacancies uploaded to OLAS, migrating from our current platform, which was RecruitFront, to OLAS. And we're excited for the new ways that OLAS can help us reach more applicants for positions, and also the tools that it will provide us in-house for our hiring teams and our supervisors looking to find the best candidates and attract them to course heads. So overall, the total budget for next year is budgeted at $679,804, and I'm sorry, $685,306, and as you can see, that's an increase of 2.9%. Any questions from anyone?
So the position of the affordable care consultant, are those duties being added to a current employee's plate, or are we looking to hire someone else?
So it's our two current benefit specialists, no additional hires. We do believe we can manage it in-house within the workload that we have. The biggest part of the lift will be actually this year to do a bit of clerical duties for inputting data, to get all the data in about our staff and as well as their dependents information in the system. But it should be relatively minor and be able to be handled by perhaps bringing in a substitute clerical for a little bit this year. Anything else? Thank you.
So that's it for tonight. We'll be back here in a couple weeks, reviewing the overall budget again, and we'll have updates from student service and athletics department. Any final questions?
So as you can see also on the budget meeting, March 16th, that's probably the date that we're going to want to try to hone in on which direction we finally go. That will be a meeting for technology and facilities. Maybe Mike Coughlin will bring some props and stuff like that as well, probably Anthony. And on Thursday, March 30th, that's our instructional district administration meeting. That's where the vast majority of the budget is put together at that point. And then what happens is between the 30th, if we can get guidance from the board on where you want us to try to settle at, it all depends come April 1st what the governor's office and the elected officials do. If we have to make some adjustments, we may need the April 13th budget workshop. But if we already have the direction and so forth from the board, we might be able to get it all ready and communicate it out so that we're set to adopt the budget on April 19th, which is also the same night that we have to do the BOCES administrative budget adoption. The biggest thing is this is the longest of all the presentations usually, we know that. As we go through it, please, if you have any questions, please send them to me. We also make sure that the board knows we videotape all of our budget meetings as well as our regular meetings and place them online. It takes us a couple days, but every bit of the workshop is up there, as well as I think, Sue, you place up the PowerPoint as well, correct? So we have that out there for those people at home as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call or my office, and we'll get in touch with you as soon as possible to answer questions. So without any further questions, we're ready to proceed with the board meeting. Thank you.
The March 30th, that's just a budget workshop, right? That's not right.
It's a board, it should say budget meeting. The regular board meeting is March 16th.
Right.
Right, and April is 19th. So we'll correct that. Oh, that's it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, everybody at home.
board report, nothing specific that I have, so I'll move on to the audit committee that had their meeting on February 15th.
So we met 3 days ago. Julie Kephart reviewed the internal audit risk assessment report, which is in the finance items tonight. Much of the activity was based upon extra classroom activities. There were some things that needed to follow up, but overall, the audit's looking much better than it has the past few years, which is really good news. Katie just, after that, went over the corrective action plan with the committee. Everything's going to be implemented the next few months. There's also going to be 3 scheduled trainings with the club advisors to discuss extra classroom funds management procedures. And that will include a discussion of proper documentation of why and why it's required.
Thank you. Next, our policy committee from the February 9th meeting.
I can take that. We met on February 9th. We had 4 policies for first reading, one of which can be seen in the minutes, policy 5240, student performances. It was recommended that that policy be deleted, not because we don't value student performances, but just because there's no need to have a policy in order to enable them. And so in the interest of trying to streamline our voluminous policies, we recommended deleting that, recommended changes to 5241 and 5252, and then we started to discuss 5253, which relates to student activity fees, and decided that it would be, there was some question about kind of what exactly the scope was, and we decided to table it and have some further information come from the district administration for future review. And then we had 4 policies for second reading, 2 of which we made minor additional edits to, 5182 and 5200, and the other 2, no further edits from the first reading, and all those are on the agenda this evening. And there was no good in the order.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now our finance items for action, we have 8.02 through 8.28. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions, or discussion on any of these items? Warren?
I'll abstain on 8.24, 8.25, 8.26, and 8.27. And I guess I should at least say, my theory is that if we're performing the service, and we have been since September on all of these contracts, for me to give approval 6 months after we've been performing the service, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I've always voted no on contracts that come to us late, so I'll abstain. Ms. Pizzetti has explained why that is. I understand why it is. You just don't have to like it.
Just so that I give Ms. Pizzetti statement.
No, she can.
Don't you know, but so the community at home knows.
Oh.
These 4 areas are health and welfare contracts that they cannot even get the numbers to work with the different districts that have to approve them until October, even though I agree they should be put in place beforehand. Unfortunately, it is a requirement of districts to approve these, and it's more of a matter of timing, which I think you recognize. We wish we could do anything, but we are obligated to pay them one way or another, and we don't even know why the state requires us to do that if we're obligated. Did I cover that well? Because we shouldn't have to vote on it.
After these contracts, there still be the same obligation to provide in time.
Yes.
The formality.
But hopefully that helps everybody understand that the rules from the state and, you know, the legal requirements we have to follow, and unfortunately everybody does.
Any other comments or questions?
As a BOCES employee, I'm going to abstain on 8.07, budget transfer report due to some BOCES expenditures in there. And also 8.16, the BOCES cost allocation methodology, and that is to avoid the appearance of impropriety.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, all those in favor of 8.02 through 8.28, with the exception of 8.24, 25, 26, 27 with Warren, and 07 and 16 with Doug. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And then the abstentions as noted. Okay. Our personnel items for action at 9.02. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions? Marianne?
On item F, number 3, I'm going to abstain from that because of conflict with the university's policy that I work for. And number 4 is non-degree, and I will vote no on that.
Still F4?
F4.
James?
I'm going to abstain from item C1 to avoid the conflict of interest because of family familial relation to the candidate.
Okay. Warren?
I'll vote no on F4. And I just want to reiterate, I do not know the person. I don't know anything about the person. I'm sure they're a lovely person, but I disagree with the school board policy that says we hire 9-degree people to teach, so.
Anything else? Okay, so all those in favor for 9.02, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, we have 2, Warren and Marianne on F4. And then abstentions, we have Marianne on F3 and Dan on C1.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. 10, we have 10.02 through 10.07. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions? Marianne?
I hope I get the right one here. 10:05, nominating some proposals. I can't think of a better person to be our representative, so cheers for Pam Stroh.
This will be her second term at this point if she's nominated and elected.
Any other comments or questions?
Oh.
Marianne?
Just the school calendar. I don't know, I guess it's the former teacher in me, but I'm looking at November and the days off for Thanksgiving, and if I'm reading this correctly, the 21st is going to be parent-teacher conference day. And I just don't know if that's, I don't expect the whole calendar to be changed, but I think with it being right before the holiday where families are going to be traveling and so forth, and possibly, getting ready for company, I don't know if it's the best day to ask parents to come in.
If I can recall from this year, didn't we do it this year and it went off without a hitch? So this was because of the way report cards fall. I normally propose the 3rd, the 9th, and the 17th. But because of the way report cards fall, we worked with our administration and tried to develop it so it's after their first report card, but also to coordinate the report cards across the district falling on the same days going forward. So leads that report card will go home on, I think, the 16th, and then first parent conference on the 17th, 21st, and 29th. And remember, parents over those 3 half days can schedule their time with the teachers at that point. No problem. And we're able to keep all the days and not lose a day in the calendar for the new way the state accounts for days now.
Yeah, as opposed to employee, I would need to abstain on 10.05 nominating board member CEOs, which was.
Okay, anything else? All right, all those in favor of 10.02 through 10.07, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And any abstentions other than Doug on 10.05? Okay, thank you. So we have our board policies for second reading and action, 11.01 through 11.04. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions, or concerns on any of these board policies?
So first of all, I want to apology to my fellow policy committee members for missing the last two meetings. And this would have been the first reading last meeting, and I didn't raise this question. But on policy 5200, co-curricular and extracurricular programs, item number 7 on the first page is being deleted. Activities must be open to all students, regardless of race, religion, sex, sexual origin, marital status, disability, or other human differences. What was the reason for deleting that?
Caitlin, do you have anything else?
Because it's addressed up at the front of the policies in 100s.
It's a requirement in our earlier 100s that the schools must follow. Duplicate.
Okay. I guess I'd be more comfortable with the statement saying that co-curricular and extracurricular programs are protected under such and such policies as well, or the students in those programs will fall under, because a parent may not know. I mean, one might assume that everything we do is covered by anti-discrimination laws, but maybe some might not assume that extends to like extracurricular sports or something like that. The other policy I wanted to ask about was 5220, student publications. Forgotten the reason why I'm asking about this. I guess it must not have been that big of a deal. Thank you.
Okay, so back on 5200. So based on Doug's proposal there, just want to open this up for discussion so we can decide, are we going to continue with the vote, or do we want to take it back to policy committee and put it on the agenda for next week?
It's really only a decision of whether you add it or not. If you want to add it, you can add it by a motion, and then we just add it in and update the policy afterwards. Caitlin, Dan, Doug, any thoughts on what to add? And the exact wording so Candy can get it up down.
I mean, I'm certainly willing to put a motion out there to amend 5200. I don't know that we get the language exactly right on the fly here, but that I don't really put it at the top or the bottom where it's
Well, I think you can put it right in at 7. How's this, Doug? The district will comply with all non-discriminatory requirements as according to New York State and federal law.
Yeah, that'd be fine with that.
Somebody catch that?
Yeah.
Happy to discuss it at the next policy committee if they prefer.
Well, we can approve it here, and then if there's an adjustment, we just run it through.
So you're making a motion?
I am making a motion for that amendment.
Second that? Okay. So, then we have the wording that Dr. Douglas just said. So let's vote on that. So we have the motion to amend 11.02. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions?
So that will reflect the change in item 7 with the language that you copied down. So Caitlin will get that. Now you need to approve that specific policy.
So now that amendment is in there, so 11.01 through 11.04 with the amendment on 11.02.
Yep.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay.
Good.
All right, we have item 12, our first reading on 3 board policies, 12.01 through 12.03. Any comments, questions, concerns to take back to the policy committee on these 3 before we bring them to vote next month? No? Everybody's good? Okay. I'll open it up now to board member comments. Marianne?
I listened to the performance of the 2 acapella groups on a weekly update, and I was very much impressed.
the state of the schools and the full budget presentation and update of the transportation were all excellent. Appreciate all the efforts, time that went into it, hours and hours and hours and hours, but very detailed. I think it's excellent information for the community, and it really helps set the stage for the whole budget season, so thank you very much.
I would echo Brian's comments about the presentations, and then Mario mentioned this earlier in his report, but I was really struck and moved by the announcement that came out from the intermediate school earlier this week. I think it was the creation of the Innovators Attic. I have a son there, so I got the announcement, and I just, we teach all of the math and reading and English and all those things, but then to teach what it means to care for one another and the value of service and the idea of volunteering and donating, I just think that's such a compelling thing. So I commend the staff. I don't want to try to name names because I won't have them all, but everybody that had a hand in putting that together and everyone that's contributing to that, I think that's just a terrific thing and reflects, what it means to be part of the district. So thank you for that.
Anything else?
I just wanted to congratulate the middle school performers. My family and I went to see Shrek on opening night, and it was really cool to see the high-class problem of needing more chairs. It was very
comfortable chairs.
Well, no, I mean they ran out of space. We need more butt space. But it was amazing to see the students, and my little one just kept saying when they took the intermission, when are they going to turn it back on? It was so cool to see it. So congratulations, and we can't wait for high school.
My daughter and I did too enjoy Shrek Jr. on the 4th Saturday, and it was another wonderful use of the new space, and it was a learning opportunity to see that I questioned leaving the performance wondering some of the main stars of the show if their talent was nature or nurture, but I definitely can tell working with Tom that it was a mixture of both for Shrek.
You probably got the Shrek movements for me.
No comment.
I remember my question now. I mean, the first question really is, do we have legal review the student publications policy? And because on distribution of literature, I just thought that there was more of a federally recognized right under First Amendment to be able to distribute literature by students on school grounds.
Not on school grounds, yeah. I know there's gray area there. If a student is handing out their solicited, if the student makes it on school grounds as part of the school has the right to know what's being distributed or control that. If the student does it on their own website, they can do whatever they want as long as it's not connected to the class educational environment. But yes, legal went through it. That's one of the legislative bills that's in front of Albany right now, is to try to amend that to open it up.
So, bottom line, legal was
Yep.
they're behind these changes. Okay.
And we pretty much follow legal and everything, go right by the book.
A couple comments that I have. Marianne, you took my acapella comment. But yes, I thought it was pretty amazing, and I love that Sue posts all that stuff on social media too. So yeah, you get to see that, and that's a performance that we probably wouldn't have had the opportunity. Didn't even know that it was happening. So then to be able to see the recap, and I thought they were really good, and I agree.
Not only the voices, but
Yeah,
the movement.
absolutely.
Oh, wow.
It was really fun to watch. The other thing too, I just want to congratulate the safety committee. We had a really great safety presentation. That was last week, right? So for those that are here, Patrick, Liz, Caitlin, everybody just did a wonderful job presenting. I had a few parents approach me over the weekend when I saw them out and about how impressed they were with everything the district is doing. And I think when you have those concentrated presentations that really kind of show the broad spectrum of work that is happening, it is pretty impressive, and it really, even though there's always things that we can continue to do better, and really great ideas and comments from the public that were there. But I think it was a great presentation, and it was nice to have that opportunity for the community to come together. You know, it'd be nice to see more people show up for future presentations, but we had like 16 or 18 members there. So thank you for that entire committee. You guys did a wonderful job putting that together. And then lastly, I don't know if we've done this in the past, but I know we just recently did it, and Mario referenced it as well. But the girls basketball team had the teacher appreciation night. And I think that was so incredible and so special. You know, I was not there, but I saw the recap afterwards, and I heard about the recap afterwards. And that was just a really special night, and I know some of the teachers that were recognized that night were just so honored and excited to be part of that. And I thought that was a great practice. So I don't know who came up with that idea, if it was the basketball coach or if it was somebody on the team or what, but whoever came up with that idea.
We hijacked it from another school that we saw and thought it was very, very nice.
Right, I thought it was brilliant, and I encourage all of our sports to do that. I think that's really special. So thank you for that.
My son teaches at UPenn, and they do that with their sports teams.
Yeah.
They single out a teacher.
Yeah, it was so nice. So anyway, so that's all I have. Any other comments? Go on one time. Okay. So motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed nay. Any abstentions? All right. I hope everybody has a wonderful evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the regularly scheduled meeting of the Horsehead Central School District Board of Education on February 16th. Our next meeting is a budget workshop, followed by a regular Board of Education meeting on March 16th. That will also be a budget presentation. Thank you very much, and all this information is being on our website.
You handle parliamentary challenges well.
Oh, hi.